CNN has learned that around 1,000 U.S. Army paratroops are headed to the Middle East. Now, sources are telling CNN soldiers with the Army's 82nd Airborne Division are expected to deploy in the next few days. Now, here's another question. Why are troops being deployed when President Trump insists talks with Iran are progressing? Now, CNN's chief national security analyst and anchor, Jim Sciutto, is actually on the ground in Tel Aviv. He joins me live. First, can you tell me a little bit about this deployment of troops that we're hearing about?
Yeah. Well, Audie, whatever the president ultimately decides about a ground operation in Iran, all the pieces are now in the region to carry one out. And it's not just the 1,000 paratroopers. You have Marines deployed to the region, and then all the forces, the air transport, et cetera, that one would require to put troops on the ground, whether that be, you've heard the discussion of Karg Island, which is so central to Iran's energy industry, or perhaps along the shores of the Strait of Hormuz to secure the Strait of Hormuz. We don't know, and ultimately it's up to the president, but at least the pieces are in place. So we're left in a situation not unlike where we were 4 weeks ago before the start of the war, where you have two tracks at the same time. You have diplomatic discussions with Iran, or at least now laying the groundwork for those discussions, with an enormous military buildup. We saw what happened 4 weeks ago. The president chose the military option, saying that the talks weren't going anywhere. So we're left in that situation again. Will the president decide that the talks aren't going anywhere in his view and then deploy further military action up to and including ground forces? We don't know. I will tell you from here in Israel, there's a great deal of skepticism as to whether there is actual potential for real peace negotiations right now.
Well, I'm joined now by Malcolm Nance. He's a retired US Naval intelligence officer and a national security expert. Good to have you this morning, Malcolm. Thank you. Two sources tell CNN that approximately 1,000 US soldiers now preparing to deploy to be available for Iran operations, as it were. And you've listed some of the units and hardware that make up this force, saying, quote, "This force is not leverage. This is a commitment to take action." What action do you expect at this point?
Well, you know, we're talking about the 82nd Airborne Brigade sending out 1,000 troops out there. They are paratroopers, or they're soldiers who are going to be hella lifted into whatever their objective are. The issue that's not being talked about is the 500 or more special operations soldiers that are being stationed in Jordan and Israel right now, who are an elite assault force. So whatever the Trump administration has planned, it is offensive. It is not defensive at all. The 82nd Airborne is a backup force for these spear tip units like Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 that, you know, objectives like Karg Island are just too small for that. That's something that one special forces unit can do, but they're bringing in Rangers, they're bringing in others. Even taking the islands in the Strait of Hormuz, Larak, Hormuz, Kishem, Hengam, Lesser Toom, Greater Toom, Abu Musa, Kish, and Siri, that is still a massive force for this. So the question is, do they have multiple intent here? Take the Strait of Hormuz Islands, take Karg Island, and then possibly a land operation somewhere in Iran. That's what this spells out. But it's really up to the White House to make clear why they need this force there if they're in end state negotiations.
Can you just game plan that for me slightly more? Just, I'm really interested to learn from you very specifically what these forces that you describe are equipped to do.
Right. Well, first, let's look at the Marines and the Tripoli Amphibious Readiness Group. That's about 2,500 Marines. Their job is to do a forced landing on hostile shores or islands. A group like that could be used against, Bandar Ijas, which is a large secondary oil pumping facility for Iran on the Indian Ocean, or to hazard their warships to go through the Strait of Hormuz and launch from ships and do an amphibious landing on like Larak or Kishem Island. That danger. They have helicopters they can do it with. They have landing craft they can do it with. but it's easily mined and it's easy narrow channel to attack with anti-ship missiles, even if you have heavy air defenses. They could helicopter over the Musandam Peninsula and land on islands like Abu Musa, which belong to the United Arab Emirates, Lesser Tum, Greater Tum. They've been doing an extensive bombing campaign on these islands this week by the U.S. government. But one thing they didn't do was they did not bomb the airstrips, which means that they look at like they're going to use that for future operations. Kishem Island, the one that's shaped like a shark, is much more extensive. It's 53 villages. It requires water from desalinization. That's a massive target. That's something that the Marines themselves may make an initial landing, but you could paradrop the 82nd Airborne troops there. But that's fraught with danger because you have to have absolute aerial control. You have to be sure there's no surface-to-air missiles, and you could lose or injure people just jumping out of the airplanes onto that big island. But Delta Force, the Rangers, they could easily take Karg Island in a matter of an hour. It's a question of keeping it without getting bombarded day and night.
I wonder whether you believe that the deployment of these troops has been part of the long-term planning and strategy, or whether this is a US administration, I don't want to say making things up as they go along, because I have no idea, what the thinking has been behind the scenes. But, I wonder whether this is sort of layering on sort of new opportunities that Pete Hegseth wants to be able to provide for Donald Trump at this point.
I'll speak frankly as a former intelligence professional. They're winging this. Every military activity that we see does not show phased planning that was part of a strategic campaign in the pre-war, where the Pentagon thought about it, prepared it, and had it ready. None of these forces were ready, especially the Marines. I mean, they seem to be an afterthought. I think in response to Donald Trump's rhetoric about let's take the Strait of Hormuz, you are now seeing the system spool up to take the Strait of Hormuz. There's no taking it. So long as Iran can deny the sea, which they could do with an anti-ship missile launched 300 miles away, this is going to be a very hard nut to crack. Worse, Becky, once the fighting starts, no one is moving any ships. There's no chance anyone's going to insure a vessel that's going to go when there is massive fighting in the Strait of Hormuz.
I've got reporting that says that key regional partner Saudi Arabia certainly wants Iran's missile capabilities sort of closed out, degraded before this war ends. So they've said to me very specifically they don't want civilian infrastructure targeted. The Wall Street Journal reports that Gulf allies, including the UAE, where I am, are considering joining this fight because they've been so relentlessly targeted in Iran's retaliation strikes or attacks. I mean, they call them reckless and unprovoked. There is no suggestion as of yet that the UAE or the Saudis are prepared to jump in offensively in this fight and join, the US here. But I wonder what a coalition would look like and achieve, and just how much degradation do you believe of Iran's military capabilities we've seen to date to ensure long-term stability in the region where I am?
Well, a coalition is not hard to put together. I mean, the GCC already has its informal networks for the militaries. The UAE would probably work with the United States in recovering an island that was stolen from them, Abu Musa Island. The Iranians just summarily took that some 20 or some odd years ago. The Saudis, on the other hand, have a big armed force, but the key component of that is using their air power to provide cover and defense for U.S. forces and other forces in the that are coming along and seizing these literal islands. As far as degrading Iran's ballistic missile capability, let's all be realistic here, okay? You cannot just say it and it's done. If it's going to be a question of degrading it and before we declare the war over, we're going to be here a year, because those missiles can be hidden, they can be moved around. We haven't even gotten into the large number of short-range ballistic missiles that they have, and we could hunt them for some time to come, just as we did in Iraq. But now you're talking an extended period of strife. the Gulf, Strait of Hormuz not opening, and quite possibly even worse, bringing the Houthi rebels into this. And they open this war to, and attack Saudi Arabia from the west and close the Bab el-Mandab waterway. It's a nightmare.
Malcolm, your perspective's really valuable. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Malcolm Nance with us this morning. Thank you.